Hey y'all, welcome to day 20 with Odyssey. This was his first ever saddling, which was a really pivotal moment in his training. I'm always really excited to see how a horse will do on their first saddling. It's a good test of the training and the preparation I've given him. He's already comfortable wearing the saddle pad and the surcingle, so he's set up well for success today. So starting out, I just had him follow the saddle to the middle of the round pin, and now I'm having him reach out and touch it. I taught him targeting on the previous day, which is basically where I say touch, and he reaches out and touches something that he might be afraid of. This helps him build confidence about the scary object. I'm using a bit of counter conditioning here, which is rewarding him with treats in between exposing him to the scary object to build positive associations with the saddle. So then I start flapping the flaps on the saddle and making noise with it, so he realizes it is an object that makes noise. I then start to mimic the motion and the noise that the saddle is going to make when it goes on his back. I then have him follow the saddle again. I think it's super important for horses to follow something they're afraid of to start to build confidence with it. The next step is to move the saddle up and down to the side of him as if I were going to put it on his back. This scares him a little and causes him to back up, so I just keep doing it until he relaxes. I repeated that for a bit and then went to actually putting the saddle on his back. I start small and just kind of drape it across his back, but he doesn't really like the feeling of it without the saddle pad. I can't imagine it's super comfortable, so I don't blame him for that, but I just go back to putting it over his back and just gently set it down. He still doesn't really like the feeling, and honestly it's probably because he's clipped and he doesn't have much of a cushion between him and the saddle. And so I was just checking the fit here, and I thought it was a good fit, so I decided from then to put it on with the saddle pad first. It wasn't that he was afraid of the saddle or not ready to have it on his back, it just wasn't the most comfortable thing for him to have it on without a pad. So I decided for now not to put it on without the pad underneath. Of course, that's something he should be able to be comfortable with for the purposes of saddle fitting, but as this is his first saddling, I want it to be a good experience, and I've already checked the fit of this saddle, so I'm just going to go ahead and go with what he's comfortable with. He's watching what I'm doing, but he's not super afraid of me swinging up the saddle on his back. I always make sure my horses are really good with me swinging up the saddle before I go to cinch it up on them. If they're not comfortable with that, I can't expect them to be comfortable moving out with the saddle on. The first few saddlings are really important to me that the horse is properly prepared. Of course, sometimes horses can still get nervous and spook about having the saddle on, but I try my best to limit that. This is why I try and make it as simple as possible for the horse. Here I just have a light English saddle with no stirrups on. There's really not that much to scare him. The only thing that I had in mind that might potentially scare him is the flaps on the saddle making noise. It's very important to me that a horse has a good and thorough introduction into being a riding horse. It's why I love starting colts so much. It's very satisfying seeing everything come together and having created a solid, confident riding horse. That's not to say that everything's going to go perfect all the time. There's going to be mistakes. Sometimes horses get nervous and buck on the first saddling or the first ride. That can still happen even if you've done all the steps, but I like to minimize the amount of stress that the horse goes through in the starting process as much as I can. What I don't want to happen is for my horse to be terrified and not ready, get overwhelmed and shut down. I don't want my horse to be one that months down the line, they could be having been ridden every day. They're still scared of the saddle. They're still scared of the rider because they just weren't ready and they weren't started in a confidence building way. So here I did stop him before my saddle slid off, but all the preparation I did with having the saddle pad slide off him, it probably wouldn't have freaked him out too much, but if I can spare my saddle from hitting the dirt, I would like to do that. Now it's time for him to wear the girth. I show it to him and he doesn't really care too much, so I start to put it on him. One thing I'll do is I'll press the girth under their belly so they can feel it and not be surprised about it when I go to pick it up on the other side. I'll also usually cinch and uncinch them a few times before having them move with the saddle on. I don't want them to think that saddle going on and getting cinched up means they immediately have to start moving and walk, trot, canter. I personally feel like you can't give a horse too slow of an introduction to the saddle to make it a positive experience. That's why I like to err on the side of caution, take my time, do all the steps again and again, and really make sure my horse is okay before they start moving. So then I felt like he was ready to start moving with the cinch on. I started just having him yield his hindquarters so he could start to feel it as he's moving. And again, the work I did with him wearing the surcingle had him well prepared, so he already knew the feeling of a girth on him, and he was okay with that. So then I had him go in a small walk circle around me. I tighten it up pretty slow, of course making sure it's never loose enough around him that it could slide under his belly if he were to panic at any moment. But after having him move a little, I can tighten him a bit more. Of course, I'm never cranking it super tight, but just to the point where you would want it if you were going to go to ride him. So finally he was ready to start really moving out. And yeah, it was pretty uneventful. All that preparation paid off. I like to say good horse training is often boring. One thing I did forget to do was flap the flaps on the saddle while it was actually on his back to make noise. That was one thing I had made a mental note to myself to do, and I did in fact forget. And so at the trot, they don't really move that much to make noise, and so he didn't really hear it that much. But if he were to start to pick up the canter, he might actually hear the flapping on the saddle even more. Of course, I did forget to do that, and so we'll see if that spooks him in a bit. So I was trying to get him to move on a bit of a larger circle and use more of the round pin. He was kind of cutting off the half the round pin that was away from the gate where my phone was set up, and so I was just encouraging him to move out a little more and use more of the round pin. I ended up getting a flag before asking him to canter. He's still not super fit, and so I haven't been asking him to canter a whole lot in the round pin because it is harder for him, and he's still learning to move on a circle. That's not really a natural thing that horses do in the wild, and so that's something he has to learn. So I used the flag to get him to move out and use more of the round pin, like I said. So then when I asked him to canter, the flaps on the saddle did start to spook him, and he did the cutest little uphill canter. So I wanted to get him moving forward in a more relaxed canter, and here I messed up because I wasn't quick enough with my rope as I was urging him forward, causing him to be able to flip around. But our training kicked in, and I was able to flip him back around, get him to canter off again, and this was a lot nicer, so I just wanted him to move out a little more. He did pick up the wrong lead in the back, but that's okay. And so when he did his little bucks, if you can even call those bucks, that was just him being a little stuck. And then once he realized he could actually move out with the saddle on and that the flapping was okay, he realized he was okay, and he didn't do it the other direction. I call this a successful first saddling because he did get a bit nervous, but that's very normal, and I think part of it was just confusion on how to move forward with the saddle on, hence why he started to go up instead of out. And so that's why I had him canter again after that. I'm not punishing him. He didn't do anything wrong or bad. There's nothing wrong with what he did. It was just a normal green horse reaction. But I'm just having him move out so he realizes he can move forward with the saddle on, and that forward is a good answer and up in the air is not the best of answers. But the reason I call this successful is because our training worked. He didn't completely freak out. He stayed responsive to me, and I was able to make it overall a very good experience for him. I've been teaching him and still will continue to teach him on how to work through when he gets stressed or nervous and how to not completely break in half, and he was doing a really good job with it. Overall, I was really happy with how this went. Thank y'all so much for watching and following along on Odyssey's journey. The support has been really amazing. I really appreciate everyone who's been commenting and following on the videos. And stay tuned for the next videos in Odyssey's training series. I'm really excited to share his journey.